Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Fosholtz. I serve as the Board Administrator for the Texas State Board of Examiners of Marriage and Family Therapists. I'd like to begin with calling the roll. Dr. Merchant.
Present.
Dr. Barty.
Present.
Dr. Elder.
Present virtually.
Thank you. Mrs. L.
Present.
Mr. Hampton.
Present.
Mr. Parrish.
Present.
Ms. Reyna.
Present.
Ms. Richardson.
Present.
And Ms. Smith could not be with us today, so we'd like to ask the board members to vote whether to excuse her absence. And I'll turn it over to Chair Merchant to begin.
Okay. I guess first, do we have to make a motion for that?
Yes, just like any other, yeah.
Okay. Would anybody like to make a motion to excuse Ms. Smith? Make a motion. Okay.
Second.
Ms. Azell seconds. All those in favor of excusing Ms. Smith, raise your hand. Okay, that is unanimous. We excuse her. Okay, well then I am calling this meeting to order at 1:10 p.m. And look, I have this gavel. Am I supposed to use it? Sure. Okay, so I call this meeting to order. I know, I'm just so official. When do I get to use the gavel? All the time? Can I use it after every vote or what?
Anytime someone's out of order.
Okay.
You're out of order.
Okay, just,
Better than throwing it.
okay. Will it come back to me like Thor if I throw it? I don't think so.
You are worthy.
Okay. Okay, well, welcome everybody to our meeting. So we will go ahead and get started. Agenda item number 2 is approval of minutes from the April 5th, 2024 board meeting. We got a video conference. I don't think that was actually a video conference. We know difference.
It's hybrid.
Oh, you're right.
April was the
right.
solar eclipse.
April was a solar eclipse. That's correct. Heard about that. Okay, so all of the, and is there any discussion over the minutes? Are you voting? Are you making a motion to accept them? Or
When
do you have
you're,
discussion?
when you're done, I have no discussion.
Okay. Because then you're making a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept.
Accept them. Okay, second. Like, any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of approving the minutes, raise your hands. Okay, that is unanimous. We will move on now to agenda item number 3, and I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Bazzles.
So I want to thank the board members for reviewing the materials for this item. Additional information was received regarding these 2 cases. The panelists determined to rescind their recommendation for dismissal, and the cases have been referred back to investigations at this time. So no action is requested from the board at this time. Again, thank you for your review if you got that far. Appreciate it.
Then we will move on to agenda items number 4, 5, and 6. For both 4, 5, and 6, there's nothing to discuss on these, so we are just going to move right past them. Agenda item number 7 is a report of agreed orders executed by the council's executive director. There were things in your packet to review. Is there any discussion over any of these? Any questions, comments, anything? Okay, then we will move on to agenda item number 8, a report of cases dismissed by the council's executive director. I do have a couple of questions, but is there any other, before I ask questions, does anybody have any discussion or questions they'd like to ask about the report of cases dismissed? My question was, I've not seen this on the report before, but what is conditional precedent not met?
So it depends on which particular rule they're dismissing it under.
Court order therapy.
Yeah, there are certain VHEC rules that procedurally require certain conditions to happen before we can proceed with an investigation. And so one of them is like the court ordered therapy. We put in a rule that says if the therapy is ordered by the court, we need to get something from the judge that says essentially we're not looking to. People were using the agency to circumvent a judge's authority and basically get somebody kicked out. And what the rule says is if there's an issue, bring it to the court, have the judge kick them off the court, because we're not going to tell a judge what to do when it's sitting before a case. We're not going to argue with them. So if the person is removed from, if the case is done or the person is removed from that case, then we will adjudicate that complaint and they can always refile. But if they file it before that happens, condition precedent hasn't been met.
Okay.
we dismiss it, let them know, you can refile whenever you meet those conditions.
Okay. Okay.
Short, long answer, sorry.
Thank you. No, that's what I was wondering, because I had no idea what that meant, so. Okay, any other discussion or questions about agenda item number 8? Okay, then moving on to agenda item number 9, status report of quarterly enforcement case activities. Any discussion over agenda item number 9?
I have a question.
Yes,
Okay, so I'm noticing under complaints reviewed at an ISC, the number is 7 for this quarter that just finished. And that seems a little bit lower in contrast to the other quarters. So as the Ethics Committee Chair, my question is there anything that we as a board can do to increase that number? Or was this just a low number because not that many cases made it to ISC? In my mind, it makes sense. There were a lot that were handled by staff under the complaints dismissed that might not have gone to ISC, but I just want to kind of explore what we can do, if anything.
My first instinct is that the cases are a little bit like snowflakes, and so not every case hits every step in the process, although every respondent gets all due diligence. So without having all of the data at my fingertips, I can't speak to exactly why this number is of informal conferences during this quarter, but that would be my guess. If you'd like, I can refer it to the investigations manager.
I personally am not, I don't think that's necessary, but I'm curious what anybody else might think. I was just wondering if we needed to do anything differently.
Patrick?
And the answer to that is I don't think that there is anything that the board needs to do, particularly right now. There's, under the report, there's 35 MFT cases pending. So there's not a large volume really for MFT to really do. And we've looked at those numbers and trying to understand the trends and trying to understand, you know, sometimes there's a lot, sometimes there's not. Sometimes it's just the way it works, but we're trying to understand, you know, different processes, and we've discussed different ways to maybe even streamline them further so that it's even more efficient. So we're certainly having internal discussions about them, but the short answer to your question is no, there's nothing in the process for the MFT board that we can think of that will make it more efficient. Especially because you guys have the lowest number of pending cases of all the boards as well, so.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion regarding agenda item number 9, Wes?
Just a comment that the total complaints resolved continues to decrease with that, which says, you know, is this lower number of cases that have to be resolved, or is this is there a reason for that? Other than,
So I will say, partly, this particular past quarter, internally, we were really focusing on closing the oldest cases, which by their nature of being the oldest were the most complicated. They'd held on a long time.
okay,
And so part of what you're seeing there is our overall numbers went down because we were really focused on getting some of those old ones out. Now that we've done that, we are trying to ramp back up.
great. I applaud that.
Yeah.
That's good.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, thoughts about agenda item number 9? Okay, then we're going to move on to agenda item number 10. And Robert, I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Excellent. Sarah, I didn't sign on this time. Would you mind sharing your screen and sharing the
You want the findings or the announcement?
findings, if you would, for the virtual viewers? So at our last meeting, I think I presented a short description of the rule review process. And so this is just an update for everyone. We have spent the spring, and first forgive me, I actually had pneumonia last week, and so if I start coughing, I'm okay. Just bear with me. The staff have gone through each of the individual boards' rule books and have identified where we believe there are rules that either need changes to follow in line with statute or meet statutory requirements, or if they're creating operational problems, or a sort of last category of things that are just subject matters we think deserve your attention. and ought to be reviewed. We then presented that list to the Rules Committee, got their input on those, and that's the initial findings that you see here that I'll go through in a moment. For everyone online and in the audience, what this is our first step at listing priorities of what we think need updates and changes. They are not specific proposals of what those changes are going to be. Our intention is to work through the rule review process to identify and set those priorities, essentially using it as a way to create a work list, a task list. Then we will go through the normal rulemaking process that involves the board in actually crafting the language of the rule change and publishing those rule proposals for comment, like we will be discussing here in just a moment on some proposed rules, and go through the normal process. Now, to do that, we are going to host a town hall style meeting where we invite licensees to come and give us your input on this list of rule priorities, and both what you think about what we have listed here, but also other ideas that you may have that you think are rules that need updating and changing. Now that actually happens to be a week from today. And so there's an announcement on our website that has also gone out. If Sarah helps remind me, she's already told me once, but I've forgotten, but I will send another email today to remind everyone that will be happening in 1 week from today. And so that will be another chance to get more input on what rules need changing. If we scroll through this list, y'all really did not have a lot of rules that need updating. And so I do want to impress upon everyone that these are fairly minor tweaks that we are looking at. The first section, if you will, are just a few provisions that need repealing because of different conflicts. And so if you go to the first one, the rule regarding professional representation has two provisions that really exceed the agency's ability to enforce. A lot of our rules deal with objectively preventing misrepresentation or fraud or deceit or improper relationships, things that we can very well prove have in fact happened. These two particular provisions we've never relied upon to enforce a disciplinary action, because what they would require us to prove is the mental impressions of another person. That a client is holding an exaggerated idea, and that somehow that is in the responsibility of the licensee. And just for ease of falling in line with sort of general legal principles of prosecuting enforcement cases, we want to stick to the things where we can show a licensee made a false representation or made themselves an exaggerated claim about their services or about their training. Because in almost all instances that we have seen, that's what's happening, is that a licensee maybe says that they are able to cure PTSD in a way that of course they can't, or use a treatment that's not fit. So that is why we are recommending getting rid of these two provisions. And of course, please stop me if you have any questions, but I'll.
Don't have a question, but I have a comment. I really appreciate you putting in red the rationale. Because I look at that and I went, well, of course, you can't enforce that. And that's the rationale for it. So I appreciate you adding that and highlighting it as a rationale. Thank you.
The next rule in relationships with clients, it's just this last sentence that is highlighted. The problem is really that the sentence is referring to another chapter of law and says that compliance is with that chapter of law, which we don't enforce, is not considered a violation of state law, which we don't have jurisdiction on. And so it's essentially a sentence that does not serve any purpose for us and just goes to overstep our jurisdiction unnecessarily. And so we're just recommending striking that sentence. The next rule that just, we suggest repealing, that doesn't need changing, is a rule related to corporation and business names. This is already governed by the Business and Commerce Code, what a person can or cannot incorporate their business name. And again, this is an area where we realized this was getting into the purview of what someone can incorporate their business as and the documents they use, which is not what we govern or discipline. Our area is in your advertising, in your dealings with clients, are you being deceptive or are you being transparent about who you are and how they can access your licensee information? And so we don't need this rule that sort of oversteps where our authority is. We can rely on this deceptive practice rules that we have. I think that may be the last repeal. One more, advertising, another sentence. Overall, the advertising rule is fine, but again, this one talks about Part 8, making a representation that's designed to take advantage of fears or emotions is an unenforceable way of saying that. There's not really a way we can prove something is designed to take advantage of fears in an objective way. And then this one is one that in our discussions with the Rules Committee, particularly some of the rules we're talking about later, y'all have already approved at your last meeting. Wanted to just go on record because the board members were very clear. Y'all don't like this. Y'all don't want to be repealing some of these rules. Statute doesn't give you the authority to give the recognition to out-of-state experience or military experience that you wish you could. And so fully recognizing that, unfortunately, this particular section in 204 related to essentially recognizing somebody who has practiced for 2 years and just waving them in, it's just not allowed under statute. We just don't actually have the authority to do that. And so we're required to repeal this.
And if I understand correctly, one of the reasons why we don't have the authority to do that is because we are waiving statute.
Exactly.
And we can't waive statute. We don't have the authority to waive statute.
Exactly.
So. But I do appreciate you noting that some of the decisions that we're having to make are things that we don't want to do, and they're hard decisions. But again, it's outside of our statute, and we have no control over our statute. And so changes in statute require legislative action, and we don't have the ability to lobby for that or to create that. That has to come from our legislators. So.
And then the last section that needs repealing is common across several boards. This is old language from when everyone was at HHSC. It's a disciplinary action called a conditional letter of agreement that, again, we don't actually have any statutory authority to use, and we have not used in years. It's not something we currently use in our toolkit, and we don't need it, and it's just language that's been sitting out there that needs to get. Okay.
Can I pause for a second?
Yeah.
Board members, does anybody have any questions about any of these things so far?
The next section are things that we identified that don't need repeal and are just things that we'd like to look across all of the boards at making sure we're sort of administratively consistent. Y'all have already done the lion's work on your out-of-state rules, and so that other boards need to look at that. We all have already taken the action on those. But the first section that we'll want to look at is court-related practices. And again, these, we're not saying to repeal these in any way. What we're saying is that the rules, it's sort of like what Patrick was saying just earlier. courts have a certain jurisdiction and control over their cases. And they get to decide the manner in which they conduct the cases, when people meet and talk and present reports and how they get paid and things like that. Some of our rules veer into that lane. And we want to just make sure that we truncate it down to what are the practice rules that guide when your licensees are before a court, how they ethically respond as a licensee without getting into court matters. And so again, before we would change any of these rules, we'd bring them back to you with suggested language. Similarly, military-related applications, again, we're already proposing to repeal the one we have to repeal. Otherwise, we just want to look across the agency as a whole of all the boards to make sure we are treating military applicants, veterans and veteran spouses as consistent across all the boards. We think we're there, but we, again, just abundance of caution to make sure those are all aligned. And then similarly, our internal operation rules about things like these board meetings, committee meetings, agendas. We just want to make sure that where there are differences, they are intentional. And when there are not, we've decided things like the names of committees. Maybe they're different just because of historic reasons, but that confuses the public because one board has a professional standards committee and one has an ethics committee and they do the same thing. So we want to look at that and harmonize where we can, mainly for transparency of operations, but not to harmonize where differences are intentional. And then telepractice, this is one we just want to take a broad look at our rules and make sure we're up to date for the modern age, that we have recognized telepractice where it's needed and that we're using the right terminology so that everyone understands what we're saying when we're talking about having virtual sessions or meetings. And are we talking about telephones? Are we talking about Zoom or things like that? And then the last category, as I said, this will be a long list that I'm not going to go fully into, but you'll see a list of just topics that are subject matter questions that after we've cleaned up all the rules, we will use this as our sort of next phase to bring to the Rules Committee to start asking the question, let's go back over some of the decisions you've made as a board and make sure those are still the policy decisions that you choose. The standards for becoming a supervisor, the time requirements, the rules about relationships between former clients and licensees. Not saying anything needs to change, but just giving ourselves the chance to ask the question, are these still the appropriate standards? And that is pretty much my presentation. Happy to answer any questions about that. Again, for those watching and listening, next week, a week from today at 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., we'll have a town hall. There will be a physical room people can come, but it is mostly designed virtually so that anyone can appear and give your input about what rules you think should add to the list.
I just wanted to add, thank you for doing this. I know this is required every 4 years, but I know it's also not maybe the most exciting part of your day. So thank you for doing that. And to the committee, thank you.
Well, and I want to add, I ditto on what Mrs. Richardson just said, but also this PowerPoint is so succinct and easy to understand. And you did it for all 4 BHEC boards. For anybody who's dually licensed, there's also a similar presentation that's LPC rule review and proposed or suggested changes and same thing. So I think it's just a very succinct, readily understandable way to present the findings. And I appreciate your work on it.
Pleasure. I'm glad we only have to do it every 4 years.
Okay, any additional comment from board members or questions or? Okay, then we're gonna do things a little bit out of order than we typically do them. We're still trying to figure out where the best place is to put public comment. We used to be that public comment came at the very end, and the problem with that is that sometimes there's things that people wanted to say before that they wanted us to consider before we had a vote. And so then we put it at the very beginning, but that, I don't know, we're gonna try it in the middle of the meeting today, so we're just gonna see how this works. So we have three public, members of the public here currently. I don't know if we have anybody online, but let's start with the, people who are here face to face, and then we will, see if there's anybody online who has a comment they would like to give.
This is Sarah, if I may begin with a little
Yes.
just
Oh, yes.
recap, housekeeping. So as Dr. Merchant noted, we'll begin with the people that are here in the room. For those of you who are attending by computer, if you would use the raise hand feature in Zoom, then I will call on you and ask you to unmute when it's your turn to give your comment. After we've exhausted all of those that have attended by computer, we'll ask anyone who's attending by telephone, use *6 to unmute. We ask that all individuals who give public comment identify themselves, and if they are representing themselves as an individual or if they are representing a larger group. The public comments are limited to 3 minutes. Will you do the timer? And McGregor will help, McGregor will help us with that. He's been MacGyver this morning to get our internet back up. What a great job he's doing. So just a Freudian slip, I guess, on my part. So we'll begin with, public comment is meant to be just that, a gathering of the public's thoughts. It's not meant to be a question and answer or a discussion with the board members. We ask that you not comment on any pending complaints or pending applications. We have other venues for that discourse. So we'll begin. The first one to sign up, I believe, was Tim Parks or Tim Parker?
Tim Parker.
Tim Parker, AAMFT?
TAMFT.
TAMFT, thank you.
I actually don't, I'm here more as an observer today.
Okay.
So thank you all for the work that you do.
And for camera purposes, do we want them to come up to the table when they give public comment?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry, to interrupt.
Yes.
We might also do public comment at the end as well, because we're still trying this out. So if you if you later, Tim, have public comment, and you want to give it at the very end, like,
Yes.
I have a feeling we'll come back to that. So anyways, okay, I'm sorry.
No worries. Next on the list is Mr. Philip Crum.
I'm just curious, how many hours did you put into all of that stuff?
Just made it up as I went along.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I got rid of my previous notes, given the events of this past week, and did a 30,000-foot view. Some things I wanted to say. My name is Philip Crum. I'm here in my dual capacities as Joe citizen and co-founder of the Association for Mental Health Professionals. I have 4 major points I want to make today. And number one, the system of systems we have in place to produce our licensees is broken badly. The system includes the accrediting institutions, legacy professional organizations, WPATH, and Big Pharma. It includes our universities and our licensing boards, all working together to implement a social and moral way of life that the public does not want. Our universities have replaced traditional Greek style of discussion and honest debate aimed at identifying the truth with a bully environment of censorship and shame. Number two, the graduates and veterans are broken. The system actively and consciously threatens any student with opposing views, driving them into other careers. The system is producing a poorly prepared grad student ready only for a remedial stint with a supervisor if they can find one. And all 4 of our boards want to know why there's a mental health care worker shortage. Now, your micromanagement of veteran counselors through regulation is threatening the depth of your existing licensee base. I don't think that you will survive the dual assault on the supply of new counselors and the long-term compliance pressure placed on licensees. Number 3, professional dialogue is broken. Intellectually honest debate is being hindered in 2 ways. Clinicians are afraid to engage in debate for a very real fear of being professionally shamed, canceled, or worse. Any debate that does take place does so in segregated, like-minded groups, which defeats the purpose of debate. This is a baked-in systemic problem. And the public is confused. COVID exposed our systemic problems, and an increasingly angry public sees what we've become and is paying the price for it. If your prime directive is to license counselors and protect Joe Citizen from them, then by that measure, we are failing them. So how do we fix this? Number one, acknowledge that the system of systems is broken. Refocus your purpose and protect your licensees from the broken system for the citizens of Texas. Number two, get out of the social ethics business. Get out of the social ethics business. Get out of the social ethics business. Your prime directive is to license more mental health professionals, not mold existing licensees into the system's dictated social professional profile. Number three, reduce the size of the bloated rule book and allow your licensees to determine the course of their own careers. Do we need more regulation? In the last 12 months, 1/6 of 1% of all licensed counselors received an official reprimand from the penalty matrix. That speaks very well
You're out of time. I'm
of
so
your
sorry.
licensee's ability. I
Thank you,
drove
Mr. Cox.
3 hours. I got a 3-hour drive back. I need 20 seconds and I'll finish.
Go for it.
Number four, refocus your oversight attention to the code of ethics required by the state of Texas before you consider adding more regulations. There's plenty of work to do in that area. Thank you for
Thank
listening.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Crockett. Ms. Kathleen Mills?
My name is Kathleen Mills, licensed professional counselor, supervisor, and co-founder of AMP. I think we all know and understand that our profession has been hijacked by the social left. Our universities, accrediting institutions, and professional organizations are all adopting by yielding to the loudest person in the room and promoting its certain ideology and feeding it to you under the guise of diversity and equality of outcome, which has nothing to do with a scientific approach to determining our generally accepted standards of care. I believe most state boards in this country have been captured. I pray you have not been. My tenured experience when dealing with clinicians, citizens, and grads. Many counselors have told me they're considering turning in their license and become a life coach. Might this be a problem for you? There is a universal complaint about being overregulated, particularly related to your soup du jour, feel good in the moment ethics to fit someone else's idea of what they should be. Citizens no longer trust the mental health community in total to deliver a quality of care consistent with their traditional values. Faith in big pharma is declining rapidly, and people are actively seeking alternatives to another pill. Students are scared in the university environment, scared of their professors while being bullied by their peers and failed for having opposing views. Far too many students are deciding to pursue other professions because of the crap they must endure in school is simply not worth it. Associates are being riddled with substantial debt while being promised $90K as an associate during their grad school experience. This makes supervisors look bad while they deliver the truth in many areas not previously discussed. I speak for all the members of our organization and quite a large number of others when I say we would like to see our boards act on the following: your call to action plan. Until our higher learning institutions restore trust by returning to an intellectually honest environment of inclusive debate, stop listening to academia. It's broken. Stop listening to professional organizations that promote a far left agenda and promotes counseling practices not based on their peer review science. Reduce the volume regulation in your Q review. 20 pages reduction would be a great start, and you can begin with these suggestions. Repeal the entire CE renewal changes adopted last year, including the 50% rule, 3-hour diversity requirement, all of it. Repeal the telehealth requirement. It's already covered in the counselor's HIPAA program installation. Repeal the crisis management requirement that you're ready to vote on today. There are systems already in place for this. Get out of the social ethics business. Stop micromanaging counselor careers through regulation. I have 2 seconds, please. Your multi-credentialed LMFTs are experienced professionals who run their own businesses, help others get started, and see clients while delivering first-class care. Combine that with the insignificant number of disciplinary actions, thanks to BHEC, and I think you can see, we are doing a pretty damn good job of monitoring ourselves and being of the highest standard. Thank you for your time and carpe diem.
Thank you, Ms. Mills.
I really like your pants.
Thank you.
So those who are attending by computer, if you would use the raise hand feature, if you'd like to give public comment. I see no raised hands. And I see no one attending by phone. So I believe that ends public comment. Oh, I have a raised hand. Raymond Rumang, I'm sorry I've mispronounced. Can you unmute?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I did not have a question, but because this is my first time ever attending a meeting, I'm a first year student at ACU at Marriage Family Therapy program, and first time ever going to this meeting. But just hearing the two other public people at present physically, I was wondering, like, kind of back in, what's the idea of the purpose of the board? And if the board, like, if also maybe like if the board is responsible for, like, sounds like a little bit the academia, the political, and and maybe the change of society. I just wonder if that's part of the purpose, like the board should be responsible for, or is it just like general, what's the purpose of the board, I guess? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Rumang.
Madam Chair, if I can,
Hey.
just since this is, you are new, for edification of all the audience, the less satisfying answer to your question is that public comment is a chance for us to receive comments, and not, unfortunately, a great opportunity for us to answer questions because of the way the open meetings law works. If it's not on our agenda, the board cannot really discuss items and give feedback in that way. I'm on staff, so I'm not on the board, so I can explain this a little more easily. And in case for new board members, that might be an interesting question. And so happy to provide that information a little bit. Because it is good, as you are about to look at these agenda items and vote on things, to remember your role as the board. So traditionally, licensing boards in the state are set there to fulfill both a policymaking and an administrative function, which is to set the standards for becoming a licensee in the state, and then to administer the program to give out those licenses to make sure people meet those requirements and follow those rules. And so there is very much a role of the board in deciding what are the necessary qualifications to be licensed as an MFT. What are the standards of practice that one must follow as an MFT? Now that is balanced by the regulatory limit of it being the minimum necessary requirements. And so you as the board are not accounting of what would be the best possible training for all MFTs, or the ideal if every MFT would have this CE experience. And instead you are looking to protect the health and safety of the public and ensure that people are getting effective care, what are the minimum qualifications necessary to be licensed? What are the minimum standards of practice that should be met? So hopefully that is a useful answer both to the gentleman who asked and to the board.
Thank you very much, Robert.
And I have another raised hand, Felicia Holloway. You have public comment. Can you unmute?
Yes. Hi, Felicia Holloway. I just wanted to say that I do appreciate the direction in which the board is going, particularly around including additional continuing education, the recent diversity, cultural competence addition, as well as the crisis management. I think they are appropriate for licensees to continue to hone those skills, to grow those skills, to be able to serve diverse populations that have been historically oppressed and marginalized. And oftentimes our models have not been based on those individual groups' experiences. Therefore, we have to have ongoing additional training in order to make sure that our models really do support the nuanced experiences of different religious, cultural, ethnic groups. And so it is very, very appropriate and not a political stance, but an ability to better serve, which is the purpose of the board, and protect clients who have differences that people may be unaware of without this additional training, and which could lead to more harm in practicing in a way that doesn't fit the nuanced experience of the diverse populations in which we live. That's my comment.
Thank you, Ms. Holloway. I see no other raised hands. Still no one logged in by phone, so I believe that completes public comment.
Okay, thank you. Like I said, we might do public comment again at the end, so we'll see. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 12, we have the report from the committee chairs. So up first is Dr. Elder with a report from the Ethics Committee.
Hi, everyone. So the Ethics Committee met on April 29th. We held 4 informal settlement conferences at that time, and they were adjudicated and agreed orders were put in place. We met on July 11th to review 4 agreed orders to make sure that we were all in agreement with the decisions that were made. And then we met on very cursorily on July 12th, where we actually revisited, there was new information presented. We revisited some of the decisions that had previously been made and decided that those cases needed to be sent back to investigations for that additional information to be validated so that new decisions could be made. And that's the summary of our report. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Then we'll move on to B, which is the report from the Licensing Standards Committee Chair, which is myself. On the Licensing Standards Committee, we did not meet. However, I did approve 4 study plans in this quarter. So again, for maybe our newer board members, if somebody has taken the exam more than 3 times, they have to submit a study plan to the board to get permission to take it a 4th or more time. And so I review those study plans just to make sure that they're actually taking steps to address maybe their test anxiety, or they're engaging with supervision, or they're doing something to like help prepare themselves to take it and pass it the 4th time or more. So I approved 4 of those. Any questions from the Licensing Standards Committee or about the Licensing Standards report? Okay, then we'll move on to C, which is a report from the Outreach Committee. That is also me, and we also did not meet. And so I do not have a report. So number D, report from the Professional Development Committee. That's Dr. Barty.
Yes, we did not meet, but we plan on meeting frequently after this meeting, if that.
Yes, which I'll talk about more
Yes,
later.
and that will come up.
Then for number E, report from the Rules Committee. that is me temporarily for the time being, just for as we're going through this 4-year rule review. So we did meet twice, once in May to go over the 4-year rule review and kind of get a presentation from Robert and kind of put together this list that y'all have already seen. And then we also met again to review the public comment for the items from agenda item 13. And so I don't have anything else for my report, and I'm ready to move on to agenda item 13 if y'all are. Okay. So there are two, we received public comment for 2 rules, 801.143 and 801.261. I have to say, we normally get like maybe a public comment or like no public comment. And I think on both of these, we got like 7 or 8 like comments, and I was like thrilled. So we love it when both the public and the professional world interact with us. So I'm really grateful for all the people who took the time to do public comment. I believe that part of the reason we did get so much public comment is we talked about this a lot in our, Russ and I presented at TAMFT, and I basically begged people to do public comment. And so I think that that is maybe possibly why we ended up with so much. So I'm really grateful for all the people who took the time to read and offer their comments. And I'll just say that their comments were helpful and effective. I'm going to take these kind of in reverse order. So we're going to start with 801.261. Basically, the Rules Committee met, and we would like to ask the board to withdraw this proposal for the time being. I think that we need to do a little bit more investigation, a little bit more research. I think we need to, when we redid this, the CEs last year, that came about through the standardization committee. There was an effort by all 4 boards to try to standardize the CE requirements. We came close. We didn't quite standardize across all 4 boards, but we got pretty close. However, I would really like for the Professional Development Committee to take up the CEs and just really thoroughly look at what our other sister boards are requiring, but also look at what like what other state requirements for CEs, maybe even looking at creative alternatives that other professions have already come up with. I just would like for us to do a much more thorough kind of examination of our CE requirements. And then perhaps do some sort of overhaul and then come back to the board sometime in the future with a better plan. I also think it would be good for us to poll and ask our constituents, like which CEs they find most helpful, which CEs are needed, which ones they feel like are superfluous. And so I'd really just like to basically do a much more thorough kind of investigation of our entire CE rule before we move forward. So I would like, can I make a motion? Am I allowed to make a motion?
No.
Oh, really?
I don't think the chair can make a motion.
Okay, if there.
Correct. It is not prohibited. It is. It is by tradition.
I'd like to make a motion that the chair never makes a motion.
Anyways, I'm sorry, I feel like I have the power now that I have a gavel. Anyway, okay, well, is there anybody who would like to make a motion that we withdraw the requirements for continuing education at this time?
I would like to make that motion.
Okay, Ms. Richardson makes a motion. Is there somebody who's gonna second? Mr. Parrish seconds. All those in favor of withdrawing this?
Wait, can we
first roll?
discuss?
Oh, I'm sorry. I
Okay,
apologize.
no problem. So just to piggyback on what Dr. Merchant said, I do think a revisit is helpful, particularly from a lens of reciprocity. We need to look at what our CE requirements do as far as our licensees being able to have a license that's most portable. And this is, I think, one of the ways that we can do that is to look at what, like Dr. Merchant said, our sister boards are doing so that we can make sure we're aligning with what most of the rest of the country is doing. That's my comment.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Did you want?
I wanted to make the comment that to your point, Dr. Merchant, the public comments are really helpful and really useful. I actually voted for this rule initially. And some public comment really got me thinking about, 1 hour of continuing education around crisis management is not. I don't think that it does the topic justice. Also, when I did some very basic Googling, I did not find a single continuing ed hour on crisis management. I since then have regretted my vote, and that's why I made the motion to repeal today.
Yes, Robert and Patrick.
Either or, we just wanted to clarify the motion, which is the current rule was proposed to add crisis management to the CE rule, and the board's motion is that it's about to be voted on is to recommend to the council to withdraw the proposed rule and not move forward with adoption,
Okay,
right?
It doesn't repeal the existing rule.
Correct.
Of course not,
Yeah,
yeah.
the rule as written still stands. The proposed amendment to the rule is the board is recommending to the council that they withdraw that proposed rule change.
So VHIC will still have to vote on this as well.
Correct.
Okay.
And to walk down that road, the council meets next in October.
But just to be clear, this rule is not in effect, so
Correct. It's
Yeah.
not in effect.
it's only a proposed rule.
Right.
So. Did you want to add anything, Robert?
That was all, yeah.
Okay. Any other discussion or comments regarding this? Okay, all those in favor of making a recommendation to withdraw this proposed amendment, this proposed rule? Okay, that's unanimous. Actually, I'm sorry, did you vote? Elvira?
No, I'm going to.
Okay.
Writing.
Okay.
But,
You're in favor?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Okay, then let's move on to agenda item 13A. So this is regarding the proposed rule changes to 801.143, which is the supervisor requirements to set equitable requirements for supervisor status. I guess what discussion, questions, comments do we have regarding 801.143?
This is Sarah for the board's consideration. After the rule was proposed and published, staff suggested changes in H and I. The Rules Committee had previously given an instruction for rules that have she or he or she, or to change that to themselves or their or them or they, that kind of thing. And also staff noted that in I as in iceberg, it calls on a current active status, and our database currently uses only one status. So the correct status for this would be active. So those are substantive changes. So they would not prohibit the rule from proceeding from proposed if to adopted, if the board so recommended. But just wanted to bring that up to your attention. In addition to the other proposals and the public comment for consideration today.
Any discussion of 801.143, any?
Just for clarification, because I saw some public comments that confused me a little bit. Are we just taking it out, cleaning up the language, so to speak? Because I thought there were also some proposals around who could provide the 40-hour course, right?
So to explain that, if I may,
Please.
to explain that, previously, this board had proposed and the council adopted that any supervisor with a graduate level supervisor, could teach the marriage and family therapy supervisor training course, that 40-hour course, to be eligible for supervisor status. Part of the discussion was that there are a limited number of marriage and family therapists with supervisor status who are currently providing the 40-hour course. And in the past, before this was codified in rule, when it was a policy, this board allowed, for example, a licensed clinical social worker with supervisor status or an LPC with supervisor status to provide this 40-hour training course. Somehow, when this section of rules was last proposed and adopted. And I apologize, I could not determine how this error occurred. But somehow, in addition to whatever provision at the top of this rule that was changed, it also got changed back to a marriage and family therapist supervisor may only provide the 40-hour course. And that was not the board's vote or intent. So we brought it back to the Rules Committee and to the board to correct the staff error. And I couldn't determine whether it was our staff or the Secretary of State or some juncture in between, which makes me nervous because then I can't make sure it didn't happen again. So that's how that occurred. And you're correct, that's on this rule as well. Thank you.
So any licensed mental health supervisor in Texas. Graduate level.
So the reason for the kind of clumsy language is that in the social work realm, a bachelor's level social worker may also hold a supervisor status. And since the MFT associates and independent licensees all have master level degrees, it was felt that perhaps that LVSW with supervisor status would not be qualified enough or educated enough to provide this 40-hour training. Whereas a master's social worker or a clinical social worker was deemed to have the appropriate qualifications.
Good. So to clarify, M is we are not limiting the training to an LMFT supervisor, which is the way it was. And we are, pardon? Well, it says the course must be taught by a licensed marriage and family therapist holding supervisor status. Is the way it was.
That was the error that occurred.
It was the error that
Right,
occurred.
right,
yeah.
but we changed that at two levels. One is we clarified that this can be a non-LMFT supervisor. And that we also added and clarified, this must be a graduate level, potentially non-LMFT supervisor that can provide the supervisor training, the 40 hours.
And to clarify the language, the word here, licensee, if you look at the definitions in chapter 801, a licensee is someone who holds a license issued by the council. So it is not a nurse, it's not a doctor, it's one of the licensees that is issued by the council that holds supervisor status at the graduate level.
Right.
Any further questions about that change in the rules? Okay, any further?
Do we need any clarification of the AAMFT approved
Well,
supervisor?
I was gonna ask if there was
Oh,
questions,
sorry.
or does anybody have any questions or need clarification, or want to understand where we're like, just any questions over the other part of the rule change about kind of standardizing the requirements to become a supervisor? Okay, well then, does anybody want to make a motion? Russ?
Yes, I move that we accept the changes as stated.
This is Jody, I second.
Is there any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of voting to approve or adopt 801, the changes to 801.143, raise your hand. Okay, we are, that's unanimous then, so motion passes.
And Chair, just to again clarify, that will go before the council at the October 15th meeting.
Thank you. Okay, agenda item number 14, discussion and action, possible action concerning changes to 801.115. I guess we're proposing this rule, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
Yes. Okay, so this is, let's see here. I gotta remember which one this one is. Okay.
Another jurisdiction.
Yeah, this one is, there's several different changes that are happening in this. So part of this, is that 801.115 as it currently is, waives statutory requirements, which we cannot do. And then, I don't know, well, I guess, I don't know if I need to explain any of this. Do I need to explain any of this, or what questions or comments, or do you all, what questions or comments do you have about
If
this?
I could,
Go ahead.
you want,
Yeah,
ahead,
I was just gonna point out to the board, we modeled this after the rule, LPC and social work. They're a little different because their statutes are different. But essentially, this offers one avenue to fix the problem that y'all were really dissatisfied
Yes.
with having to repeal the existing 115. Because your existing language would have, as you said, waived a statutory requirement.
Right.
And so instead, all this essentially says is if someone is held an active license for 2 years, then they must only meet the minimum statutory requirements. So it's saying whatever else you had described in rule about those requirements that maybe they don't meet for some reason, those extra descriptions don't have to be met, but the fundamental statutory requirements still have to be met.
So examples of like the non-statutory requirements would be things like, that 500 hours have to be relational, or the limits on how many telehealth hours you can have, or the exact course content of your degree. Like all of those things would be things that the board, because that's in rule, we can waive those things, but those statutory requirements, like we're unable to waive those. So this is just kind of clarifying that we can, if somebody has been licensed in another jurisdiction for at least it is 2 years, right? Yes, for at least 2 years, that we can waive the non-statutory things. We just can't waive the statutory things. Any questions, comments about any of this?
I might ask
Yeah.
for one point of discussion from the board about
Yes.
it, just to give us guidance and make sure it's written correctly. Your statute, by tradition, all the boards require a degree, an exam, and experience.
Correct.
And typically that experience is described as supervised experience. That's what the rules require, that you have a supervisor. Uniquely, your statute simply says work experience.
Exactly, yeah.
It does not require it be supervised necessarily. Now, that's no problem for the general requirement that you have laid out, that it be supervised experience. That is within your purview to explain what that work experience means. For these individuals in particular, when you are saying folks who are coming in from another jurisdiction and have already been licensed and been working, we as staff would need to verify that they have 3,000 hours of work experience to meet the statute. As written as the underlying minimum statutory requirement, we would only require that be 3,000 hours of work experience as an LMFT. We would not look to determine if it was or was not supervised at any point. Because that's a little bit hard for out-of-state applicants to record sometimes, especially folks, if we're not talking about 2 years, we're talking about 20 years. They don't necessarily have records of their supervision anymore. And so it is administratively easier to just affirm 3,000 hours of work experience. But that is up to you, the board, whether you would want us to verify that it is 3,000 hours of supervised work experience. And if that were the case, we might want to put that word in there.
so
Go ahead.
sorry, if you were talking, I heard you say work experience as an LMFT, which is an independent license type. Thereby, the work experience would by definition not be supervised.
So it would be,
Whereas the LMFT, who was also an associate, perhaps in another state, might have 3,000 hours of supervised experience before they became the LMFT, the independent license, and held that independent license for 2 years. Do you see what I'm? I'm making it worse.
I read it as well.
So well, it essentially, y'all have to decide what kind of 3,000 hours experience does that person need to have come with? And what amount of verification do we need to do? The assumption, the reason you would have this sort of rule in the first place is a certain sense of reciprocity. You would essentially say, if someone has already gone through the licensing process in another state and have held the LMFT independent license for 2 years, they must have gone through some amount of experience and check. And we can rely on that state to have done that. And if they meet these certain requirements, we're comfortable with that. That does allow, if there is a state that has lower requirements, that they are only holding them to those lower requirements for that initial licensure. Though again, they would have had to work 2 years after that.
Just a question, is it valuable to add a line about, well, no, it's in there, sorry, in good standing, so there's no pending
Yes.
complaints, that kind of thing?
Yes,
Excuse me.
that is why that's there.
The other thing for the board's consideration, because I heard Robert say, and I read in the rule, will be deemed to have met all academic and experience requirements, that staff would deem all requirements met, where I heard Dr. Merchant say the board may waive. So one is a staff process where staff relies on this rule, looks at the application, makes check marks on this is done, this is done, this is done, the application proceeds. The other is the application and the documentation is set aside and a licensing committee reviews and says, we may waive X, Y, or Z. And I just want to make sure that what we're talking about, the same thing and could you clarify what that is?
Yeah, no, my intention would be that staff would be able to do this work without having to consult the board.
Please.
Yeah, no, I was just trying to make the point that like, when it comes to like the authority of the board, like the board can only make rules that waive rule requirements. The board cannot make rules that waive statutory requirements.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got a question. I'm a newbie, but
Yeah.
if we're moving down the path of reciprocity, which is what it seems like we're moving down the path, and our hands seem to be tied by statute at some point, and we've met the minimum requirements of statute, while we add additional onerous procedures and processes on top of that. Is there a reason?
I couldn't agree more. I think if we change it to 3,000 hours of supervised experience, we're absolutely contradicting the intent of the rule, which is to increase reciprocity.
Great. And just one other clarification, 200 hours of supervision that includes at least 100 hours of individual supervision. Would staff also be empowered to consider the 100 hours of graduate bringing in? Or are they gonna have 200 hours? Because the statute says 200 hours. Now, that's daunting.
I mean, I would assume that staff would still be able to apply the rule that they can bring in 100 hours from their graduate internship.
Are they gonna be able to with this?
I defer to the attorneys. I believe that rule has a future end date.
I don't think that rule does not. The other one does.
114 for the practicum access hours.
Yes, but I think it only applies to, that only applies to the direct hours. I don't think that applies to the supervision hours.
Oh, I
Good.
think you're right.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
Give me one moment.
But again, I'll defer to.
I believe there is a statutory.
Because the statute says that you can count supervision hours in a manner acceptable to the board. Which is one of the problems with with the line about our direct client hours, is it does not say in a manner acceptable to the board. It says after the receipt of a master's degree.
Right.
But when it comes to our supervision hours, it says in a manner acceptable to the board. So we have leeway to make some rules around that. We can't change the 200. We
Right.
can't change the 100 individual, but we can change how those hours are counted.
Yes,
Right.
and
We can credit.
And that's what I wanted to clarify, that we can credit.
yes, and generally, I would say the principal staff would use where the rules are silent is that all applicants are treated the same. And so in that context where the general application rules allow and direct staff to credit for educational experience, that we would provide that same credit for these applicants, because to do otherwise without a direction would not make sense.
Good. I just wanted clarification on it. Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion about 801.115? Would anybody like to make a motion? Russ, put him on the spot.
You can do it, Brett. I believe in you.
Okay, I'll make a motion.
I'll second your.
Okay.
Okay, so we have, so
What's your motion?
Whatever we've been talking about for the past 10 minutes.
Do you think it's a good thing?
I think it's a good thing.
Okay.
I like this.
So you
And
think-
I choose that we
make a motion to propose.
that we move forward with this proposed new rule. Or whatever we do with it.
Any further discussion regarding the proposed rule?
And-
Yes.
And the motion is this will be
Right.
proposed to the
To
council.
council,
at the
yes.
October meeting.
Or October.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
It's gonna be a long meeting.
Okay, all those in favor of sending this up to BHEC, raise your hand. Okay, that is unanimous. Okay, we're moving on to agenda item number 15, discussion of possible action regarding the jurisprudence exam.
The report was in your meeting materials. Be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I have a question. So I noticed that when we look under level of licensure, which is question 4, we collect LMFT, LMFT associate, none, or student, and then licensed by another jurisdiction. Would it benefit us as a board in any way to have the data, how many people who take the JP exam are LMFT supervisors? I would like to know personally, like how many people are taking it because they're required to? How many are taking it when they renew because they want that one CE and they find it beneficial? But I'm just curious what the rest of the board would think.
Can you only, I guess you can probably only choose one. So like LMFT supervisors would choose LMFTS as opposed to just LMFT. Right?
I believe the question's set up so that, yes, you can answer only one. I can check with the vendor about adding.
Well, when I took it just yesterday, because I'm renewing my license, there was not an LMFT supervisor option. It was just
Right.
LMFT or LMFT associate. And I'm just curious about, I mean, if it's too much trouble and we don't think it would be beneficial, then I don't go through the trouble, but I'd be curious to see how many who are LMFT supervisors take the exam.
I can certainly ask the vendor about adding an option for LMFT supervisor.
Dr. Elder, since all MFTs have to renew, I'm curious about what data that would offer us. Not that I don't think it's a bad idea. I'm just curious about what data you feel like that would drive.
Well, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't have it all memorized, but it's my understanding that to renew just your general LMFT license, you are not required to take the JP exam. You can take it and get 1 hour of CE credit for it if you choose, but it's not required. It's only required for LMFT supervisors each renewal period. So my thought would be, how many people are taking it because it's required? How many are taking it because they find it beneficial? That would be interesting.
Thank you.
I don't know. I think that actually might be some interesting data. So if it's pretty easy to add an LMFTS button, I don't see any reason not to. Any other comments, discussion, questions?
I'm so instructed. Thank you, Dr. Elder.
Any other discussion regarding, what are we on? 15, regarding the jurisprudence exam? I will just comment that I am pleased to see that some of the, I made the same comment the last time, but like, we put a lot of effort into making sure that our questions are relevant on the JP exam. And I do feel like the comments that people have made on the JP exam about it being helpful and useful and not too much BHEC, like I feel like the comments that we've gotten reflect the work that the board has done, to improve the exam. So just thank y'all for your work. Okay, if there's no further discussion, then we will move on to agenda item number 16, which is report from me. Okay, so I don't actually have a whole lot to say to you guys today. I am really excited though to welcome our newest board member, Mr. Lee Hampton. So welcome.
Thank you.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Okay, 20 minutes? or-
20 minutes.
Lee Hampton, grew up in little town, Louisiana, called Opelousas. I'm severely left-brained. I've got 2 engineering degrees, so that kind of is my excuse for being left-brained. Currently live in Houston, Texas, spent 20 years in corporate America. Decided to do my own thing, so currently own and run a small construction company, residential and light commercial. 3 kids, married, 3 grown kids, and just happy to be a public member on this board. I do have prior board experience, spent 10 years on planning and zoning, building standards in my local municipality, Bel-Air, Texas, and currently serve on another nonprofit board as well. So I have some board experience. Look forward to learning from the professionals and look forward to it.
Awesome. Thank you. We're glad you're here. Thank you. Yeah. So I'm really excited. This means that our board is finally back at full capacity.
Yay.
So that means none of you are allowed to leave. Okay, because we were finally at full capacity.
Make a motion then.
Let me see here. So because we were back at full capacity, this means that I'm going to redo committee assignments again. Even though I just did them a couple of months ago, I'm gonna redo those. So I just kind of like to outline kind of some of the tasks of the committees that we have kind of coming up, the things that I would like for you all to do. So that way, if you do have a particular committee assignment that you would really like to be on, you can, we can discuss it, or you can let me know, or you can think about it. But this way, I do want to give y'all some preference in the matter if I can. So anyway, so the Rules Committee, currently on that is myself and Dr. Barty and Dr. Elder and Mr. Parrish. The Rules Committee is probably going to be pretty busy this next year as we are, all these things that Robert has outlined. We are going to be going through and looking at most of those topics. The Rules Committee will handle many of the discussions and proposed rule changes regarding that. So we're going to be pretty busy probably for the next year. The Professional Development Committee, as I mentioned, that has Russ on it, Dr. Barty, and then I'll be honest, I probably should have pulled up the committee assignment so I can remember who's where currently, but it doesn't matter because it's all going to change.
Nicole, Janine, and Barbie.
Okay. The Professional Development Committee, you guys are going to tackle, I would like for y'all to tackle the CE requirements. And so again, the things that I would want y'all to do with that would be to maybe, again, look at our sister boards and their CE requirements, looking at the other state boards across the United States and kind of looking at their CE requirements, looking maybe to some other professions and how they handle CE requirements. And then, like I said, reaching out to our licensees to maybe do some research that way. So that will be the major task of the Professional Development Committee, will be that reviewing our CE requirements. The Licensing Standards Committee is our third committee, and currently I think I am the chair of that, and then I'm not sure who else is on that right now.
Elvira, Nicole, and Janine.
Okay. The Licensing Standards Committee, I would really like for us to look at the academic and experience requirements. I mean, currently the academic and experience requirements, well, not the academic, the experience requirements are mostly out of our control. But maybe we'll get lucky and there'll be some changes with our statute this upcoming legislative session. And then maybe we will have a little bit more freedom to maybe make some changes to experience requirements. But especially looking over some of our academic requirements, I think would be good. One of the things the Rules Committee noted is that there are, through the rule review, so there are maybe some slight discrepancies between like the co-empty requirements and our current academic requirements. Maybe we can look at those. I'm also curious, this would be probably a question for Daryl, but maybe Robert could answer, or maybe Sarah, but I'm curious if like BHEC has any funds for or ability to like conduct more formal research regarding like experience requirements.
Research in
I don't know, like if we wanted to, if the licensing standards committee wanted to conduct like peer reviewed academic research, like which experience requirements do really truly meet the minimum threshold? Is that something that the licensing committee or the BHEC could take on, or is that outside of our purview or?
Certainly, we have not previously built that into the budget. And so
Okay,
it's
yeah.
certainly not earmarked
Right.
for that. Just off the top of my head, is that an allowable state expense? I can't see why it wouldn't be. I think the subject matter is in the purview of the council. I think the nature of spending that would fit into our budget strategies. I think the state contracting law be the bigger hurdle.
Okay.
I think we'd have to really think about how you structure such a thing.
Okay.
And how, because traditionally when you pay things out, you're bidding.
Oh, yes,
And
yes.
sending
Oh,
out
yeah.
bids to people
Yeah,
to propose, and so it'd be sort of like inviting research proposals.
okay,
And that may not, the sort of state rules about going with the lowest bid might not get you the research you're wanting.
right, yeah. It's true.
So I'm not sure that the state contracting and purchasing rules are set up to do what you're looking at,
Okay.
but I don't think it's prohibited. So we can certainly have those conversations.
Yeah, well, I don't even know if it, how much money would cost or could even actually cost money. I don't even know. This is just me thinking.
Yeah, it's an
you
interesting
know,
idea.
Just anyway. I do know that AMFTRB, or I hear that AMFTRB is also maybe trying to do some research related to like experience requirements and kind of the minimums. And so it could be that maybe we visit with AMFTRB, see what they're doing. I'm not really sure. I've sent an email to Lois with AMFTRB to ask what kind of research they are doing. Because anyways, she has not responded to me, so I don't know. Anyways, but that is probably something I'm gonna have the licensing standards committee take up as one. Probably just starting by reviewing the academic requirements, which I think will be probably a pretty small task, but then maybe trying to look into these experience requirements. I don't know, we'll see where that goes, but that's something I would like the licensing standards committee to take out. Then we have the outreach committee. There's been so much going on in the outreach committee. We haven't really had a chance to like really meet or get a whole lot done, to be quite honest. I would like to maybe change some of that. The outreach committee does kind of what Russ and I did. We go to conferences and things like that and give presentations. They also, for a while, they were working on occupational differences. So trying to like, for the public, kind of educating them, perhaps creating some sort of document on our website, kind of educate the public about the difference between a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a marriage and family therapist, a licensed professional counselor, a life coach, a pastoral counselor, an LCDC, like looking at kind of all these different helping professions and trying to help the public to differentiate the alphabet soup, you know? I know it's my understanding though that BHEC also has maybe had some interest in this. Is that correct?
I think one of the other boards brought this same topic up.
Okay. And so it might be one thing that maybe the outreach committee could do is maybe reach out to this other sister board and kind of see what they're thinking, and maybe we could try to work together to come up with something together. I also would like to, I just know that like there are things that like I have run into just as a professional. Okay, well, like, I can give you a couple of examples. A couple of examples are one, even this survey that gosh, what is the survey that y'all have in our, thank you, the workforce survey. There were comments in the workforce survey where people just seemed incredibly confused about our roles. I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about like, I run into supervisors who have no idea like what their role and responsibility is as a supervisor, and it's like greatly concerning. I've had supervisors tell me that they don't like brush off the idea of having to like have their students report their hours every week. Like they're like, no, I'm not gonna sign that every week. That's too much trouble. And it's like, I don't know. I just run into these things that are just very concerning to me. And so I'm wondering again, if the outreach committee could be, if there's anything the outreach committee could do, and it's possible there's nothing we can do, but in terms of just trying to educate licensees about the rules in a better way, whether that is putting together literature for our website, whether that's putting together webinars, whether that's doing, more public speaking engagements. I'm not really sure what the solution is, but I really would like to figure out some way for the outreach committee to maybe do a better job of educating people about
And
things.
maybe partner with the professional development,
And maybe partner with professional development. to do
clarify.
some of these things.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and then of course, the last committee is the ethics committee. The ethics committee, I mean, their primary job is to do the, individual settlement conferences, and hear ethics cases. So anyways, those are our 5 committees. Any questions, comments, thoughts about any of those?
You wanna know who's on those other committees? Like
Uh,
ethics is Jody, me, Barbie, Lisa, and then the outreach is Lisa, Elvira, Janine, and Jody
So
at present,
at present,
until it's gonna be
until I'm about to like
reshuffled.
tweak things. I'm about
Until
to-
5 o'clock today.
Is there anybody who just kind of hearing these different tasks? Well, I guess 2 questions. One, are there any of these? Well, no, I'll come to that. Well, I feel like it's on, I can talk about this. I can ask because it's on the agenda elsewhere, if there's any other. Is there any other things that y'all have picked up that y'all think the committees need to be addressing? Like, are there any other topics or directions that you think that the committees need to be going in?
I think you're addressing some of the comments that we saw in different places about communication. People are asking for, like, they're saying things like they don't understand the rule changes, or the logic behind the rule changes, and I think you're kind of pointing out that maybe there are some gaps that we could fill with the committees.
Any other future directions or things that?
Dr. Merchant, one of the things that I think is very helpful is for us to educate the public as much as possible, including licensees, how to make public comment. I think that I really, really support a lot of the changes that have been made to our website that make it so easy. Like, here's the proposed rule, click on this to make a comment. I'm just wondering if, I think that might be outreach committee who could create even just a 30-second video with screenshots or walking people through, here's how you can make public comment, because the Texas Register is confusing. As a person who served, I found it confusing. As a person who served for 12 years as a liaison to the board, it's difficult to navigate. It's difficult to understand the difference between the preamble and the proposed rule. And so I think we've done a lot to clarify that as much as possible, but anything we could do to clarify it further, I think would remove barriers to licensee and public participation in our process.
Thank you. Okay, if you need time to think about, that's fine, but is there anybody here who just feels like there are any of these tasks that they, like, does anybody have a preferred committee assignment, something that they would really like to jump on? Any of these tasks or directions? Wherever you're needed.
Maybe everybody submit to you,
Yeah,
like a 1, 2, 3,
that would work too.
pardon?
Send it to me.
Send it to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you do have a preference.
If you have
put Sarah.
preferences, like 1, 2, 3 preference or something like that?
And I have a document that for each committee lists what rules may be pertinent to that particular committee's functions. So I can send that out after the board
Sure.
meeting.
Okay.
Great.
Okay. Okay, let's see if there's anything else that I need to talk to you about. Lawsuits, no. As I mentioned, Russ and I did present at TAMFT in April, and it was a lot of fun. We got a lot of really good engagement with the audience. One thing, a lot of feedback that I got from that is that needs to be an 1.5-hour presentation as opposed to just an hour presentation, and I totally agree, Tim.
Don't.
Not TAMFT, right?
Yes.
Okay, anyways, yeah. So put in a word. Anyways, but
We were having to talk pretty fast and we went over.
I know, we did. We went over, they were kicking us out of the room. And so, anyway, so yeah, I think that went really well. lots of comments and conversations with people afterwards, and so I'm really glad that we get to do that. I do believe, Dr. Elder, will you be going to TCA this fall?
Myself and Dr. Barty are going to be co-presenting again at the Texas Counseling Association Conference in November. Yes.
Excellent. Okay, good, good. So I don't think I have anything else. Any discussion, question, comments for me as the board chair? Okay, then let's move on to agenda item number 17. Report from the board's delegates to BHEC. Janine is not here. Mr. Parrish or Robert or Patrick, do y'all have anything y'all want to jump in here?
I can report that the proposed rules that were approved by the council on June 25th are expected to be published on the August 2nd Texas Register.
Thank you.
So those are in the works.
And in the materials Sarah provided to you, you'll see all the regular budget and quarterly reports, and it also has the council's newly adopted strategic plan for the next 4 years, or 5 years, and some legislative appropriation request items for prognosis for next year. So won't go through any of those, but happy to, as you peruse, if you have questions, please reach out, or if you have any questions now, I'm happy to discuss.
I do have some questions. First though, are there any questions from the board members regarding any of the proposed rules? Anything as far as that goes? Okay. I had a question, let's see here. I just want to make a comment about the strategic plan, that I really do appreciate and like the goals laid out in BHEC's strategic plan. I also really appreciate the discussion about needed legislative changes in that strategic plan. And what exactly, like, where does this strategic plan go? Like, who beyond us reads this?
So the it is submitted to the governor's office, lieutenant governor, speaker of the house, legislative budget board,
Okay,
state auditors, all those.
okay. But they probably have a lot of these to read,
Yes.
so who knows if they actually do.
Who reads them? I don't know. I don't know that anyone.
Okay,
Unfortunately.
okay.
They're a document for us to be striving for.
Okay. So could we like take that page on legislative changes and like just like highlight it, and just submit that, or?
Absolutely, and if particularly if there were, I don't know, an association of your licensees that happened to be in the room. It is certainly on the legislative front, that is where members of the public and licensees and associations can be communicating their desire for those changes as well.
Right, and is the strategic plan on our website so that, okay, so if somebody wanted to read that, take note of those legislative changes and do something with that information, they could. Okay. Let's see here. I also was wondering, any other questions or comments about the strategic plan before I move on to any of these other topics?
Yes.
Yes.
Really quickly, I just want to add that I absolutely love the strategic planning survey results. The fact that we've asked and honored input from stakeholders, I think is crucial for the success of the strategic plan. And I absolutely agree with so many of the changes that are suggested. Read the whole thing and like just almost cried. I was so happy to hear a lot of these things, in particular, the ombudsman. I don't know if I said that right. But that word has always befuddled me. However, I do think that is going to clear up so much of our customer service complaints. And I'm super excited about that moving forward. I guess my question is, what I've heard from licensees is that they might contact the board and get a timely response from the board. In that response, it's a like cut and paste quote of the rules, refer to these rules, which I know that our staff has to be super careful about interpreting rules. And so that's kind of the pat response. But people, in my understanding, are reaching out to the board because they're confused by the rules and they need help understanding it. So is that going to be the role of the ombudsman, is helping people kind of interpret and understand how to apply the rules?
So the ombudsman will be mostly focused on the license application side. It will be really for folks who are trying to either apply new or renew or get supervisor status and are having trouble negotiating the bureaucratic process of getting all those materials collected, getting the correct proof, things like that. When it's a current licensee and it's really a question about the rules of practice and the standards of practice, those questions are typically received in this case by Sarah, by the board administrator. And so that is both good and bad for them in the sense that they are getting a high level employee who has a lot of experience to answer these questions. But we are mindful that we have to answer consistently for everyone. And so, yeah, it is, we know it's frustrating that there are folks wanting to sort of say, hey, what's the sort of the example Dr. Merchant gave earlier of someone saying, well, I don't really want to track my students' hours. We'll often get questions about things like, well, how should I track their hours? How often should I track their hours? How should I sign? There's not a rule that specifies exactly how they should do it. And we can't say, and frankly, if we elevated the question to you as the board, you couldn't say, well, you need to use this exact form, because there's not a rule that says you have to use this exact form. So we have to balance giving them sort of pointing to, well, this is what the rule language says you have to do. Whatever you do that meets that. It's not always satisfying, but we know that is a place of frustration. And so we are working on updating any sort of template language that we use to answer questions, our frequently asked question page on our website. We're trying to give more information where we can.
Would it be helpful if we as a board were to create guidelines? We've done it before where it's like, it's not a rule, but it's a guideline that we publish on the website as a tool for licensees to kind of answer some of these gray areas that they're unsure about.
If there are areas where you feel like having some sort of guidance document that truly is, here is one way to do it, but it is not required. Certainly, yeah, we can, if there are areas y'all want to explore that, there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you're not then pointing to it later and saying, you didn't do this and therefore you violated rule, because that's not how guidance documents work.
Well, I think for us as a board, our focus is on minimum standards. At the same time, some type of, here's the best practice for supervisors. To Dr. Merchant's point, we want to make sure we have very competent, very effective supervisors in place. And I think if we were to be able to create some kind of like best practice guidelines for supervisors, it would be welcomed. I don't think it would be seen as additional regulation. I think it'd be welcomed and supportive. So just a thought.
Maybe that could tie back to that outreach and professional development piece.
Yep, I'm taking notes.
Okay.
Yeah. I gotta write this note down, hold on.
Would that be then something that staff would refer people to when they call with questions? And
Certainly, yeah, absolutely. It is a little hard, we certainly strive as staff to do as much of the groundwork as we can for you as the board. Y'all are volunteers. You're not hired to do a full-time job here as we are. But when you get into questions like that are so subject matter specific, we are not licensees. And so it would be very helpful if you have a desire to have guidance documents like that we would need that to come from the board because we just don't have the expertise to even start a draft of what that would look like. At least I certainly don't.
And on the, for the board's consideration, on the flip side of the board not pointing to the guideline and telling the licensee, this was your standard you needed to meet. The flip side of that is not creating the expectation that the person may rely solely on that guideline. And part of my very carefully worded responses of what can I do this, or do the rules allow me to do X, is that there is a rule that says I may not make an unofficial statement, that it carries no weight with the council or the board. It provides no safe harbor. So I'm very carefully trying not to build the expectation that later down the road, someone will tell the council or the board, well, Sarah said I could do that. Because I don't have the authority or the expertise to tell them what they can or can't do. Not an attorney. I'm not their attorney. I don't know I have maybe 12 words to understand their situation, and that's not a consultation and that's not legal advice. So just the flip side of that for your consideration.
So what does a guideline look like? Is it a template? Is it something we've got to maintain? Is it something we're expanding to do guidelines for other areas? What does a guideline really look like?
We have two on our website currently.
Okay.
One related to telehealth and one related to social media. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Do y'all want to say more about that?
It can vary depending on what you're trying to give guidance on. And so if it is something like telepractice, it would generally be a list of, here are things, and I'm gonna speak without actually having seen this document yet, but a list of principles, a list of, here are things you need to keep in mind. Not a comprehensive, but just, here are things as you're going about that you might want to do or not do.
Would that be subject to your 4-year review?
No, because it's not a rule, and it's very specifically saying, as Sarah was saying, doing this doesn't mean you're golden. Not doing this doesn't mean you're in trouble. It is purely things to consider. In the instance of the supervisor role, it could also be, here are template documents that other supervisors have used in the past. Use them as you will if you want to or not. But logs of hours or ways to track things, those kinds of things could exist. You could have templates. The more you go down that road, you do have to keep them updated, and you have to make sure you're not going farther than the minimum guidance you want to get.
Right. And you still have to maintain them, whether they're part of the 4-year review or not. Somebody has to look at them periodically to make sure that they're still applicable.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and also part of, to answer Dr. Elder's question is, Tim has also maintained a really long list of FAQs and answers, which kind of relates back to that. So because we get oftentimes the same question. And so he's able to say, here, if you look on our website under this FAQ, it says a great answer to what, guidance for what this is. It may point them to a rule, but it may also give them some sort of guidance, because that's what it is. They're looking for some sort of guidance. The big real problem we get into, the issue, like what Sarah was talking about, is, I can remember specifically at psych board getting phone calls and people say, can I administer this test? And my first thought would be, if you're calling and asking me, no, you should not be administering that test. But, there's a rule in psychology said, if you have the proper training, skill, education, etc., to administer that test, that sort of competency area, you can practice in that area, you're fine. And so we would have to say, this is that rule, this is where you would have to do that. But if you're asking me, what they're looking for is they're looking for a written permission from the agency to say, you are permitted to administer this test, and we can't do that. That's not what we do, right? We can't give them the green, oh, I administered the test and I messed it up, but the board said it was fine. Like, they got an email from them and said it did it fine. So that's where what Sarah's talking about, like, we have to be wary of getting into that sort of a situation.
I think what I had in mind was, I think there's this void between the bare minimum, which is what our rule our rules are, like, here's the minimum standard to protect the public. And that is what Ms. Vasholtz is limited to, advising anyone about, are those minimum standards. But there's so much more that comes with practice. That's like the meat on the bones. How do I do this? How do I implement this? That she cannot advise licensees about. And so I guess that's where I think we as a board could possibly step in and demystify some of this by putting the meat on the bone, saying, here's one way you could possibly do it, just to decrease confusion.
So I think if you're gonna do that, though, there's gotta be a process in place to update those periodically, because you guys, staff owns the rules. You're saying you don't own the guidelines, which means we as the board own the guidelines.
I think that might go back to the outreach committee, though maybe another one of the tasks of the outreach committee would be to make sure that they are periodically reviewing any of these guidelines that we've created.
And we are, as staff, are good at putting things on calendars, so we can certainly make sure it does come to your attention to update.
As long as there's a process in place to look at those periodically and update them.
Did you have something, Patrick?
I was just gonna add, it sounds like they're probably talking about safe harbor forms. Is that possibly what they're talking about? Like, this is a form you could use that would help with that?
Well, I think it's worth a longer discussion, and particularly if y'all have encountered materials or if y'all have things from your universities that you're thinking of, like, oh, this was a really handy checklist for folks to think about, or a guy, send those to us to look at, and we can start a conversation about, is this in the format that would be useful? Is this stepping too far? Where's language that gets concerning? Because yeah, if we're wanting to have a safe harbor form, that carries with it a lot more. That's a lot bigger deal. And it doesn't sound like that's really what you want.
Yeah, I don't know that I had in mind to like give suggestions of forms, but like, I'm just thinking about, there have been times where we have requested a supervision file and the supervisor has had no idea what we were even talking about. Even though it's in rule, a list of all the things that need to be in a supervision file. And so, or even like how to fill out the supervised experience form, like maybe just like a little short webinar over, here's everything that needs to go in a supervision file. Here's all the things you need to make sure you're tracking, that you need to make sure you're signing off on this every week. And the reason is because if you die, like this person can't verify their hours, you know what I mean? Like, just kind of explaining some of those things and maybe even like the reason behind them so that people don't think that we're just like making up rules willy-nilly, but like there's a reason these rules exist because we've encountered these problems.
I actually think that would be in line too with some of the feedback we've gotten as far as like explaining the rules. Because I'm a little nervous to do some of this stuff because, if a supervisor says, well, I just don't sign off on the hours every week, then you're not meeting the minimum standard required already. And so what makes us think that they would even bother reading a guideline? So perhaps it is, and we have made some new rules specifically about like how supervisors are supposed to document certain things so that in the event of incapacitation or death, the supervisee has a way to prove that they have completed a certain amount. And I think especially now that more supervisors are doing things virtually, I certainly think it's okay to have some sort of discussion about, look, this is the rule. There's a whole lot of different ways to go about being in compliance with this rule.
Right.
But I'm a little nervous to just kind of say like, oh, here's a guideline, let's solve it for you. I also think that removes the necessity for therapists to be in conference and in peer support with each other and sharing best practices, which is something we're supposed to be doing anyway. Again, that's gold standard. I realize that's not necessarily a board rule, but that is the gold standard of care.
I also think there's a difference between the supervisors out there who are just terrible supervisors, who are just going to not care about the rules, and then the people who I think want to follow the rules, but just have a hard time interpreting them or have a hard time understanding them or don't know where to look, And so, I mean, I think you're right. People who are just like terrible supervisors are probably not gonna like go seek this out anyway.
Step out for a minute.
Okay. Do we need a bathroom break?
We do.
Okay, why don't we just pause the conversation here and let's take a 10-minute bathroom break.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Okay, welcome back from our little break. Okay, so where were we in our conversation?
Item number 17, I think.
Yeah,
So
so
Robert?
let me just wrap up the conversation of, I think y'all are very interested in exploring guidance documents and ways to, and it sounds like a lot of the topics, there will be some overlap between clarifying of the rules themselves to be in more plain language and clear for folks, or having guidance documents that help explain the rules. And so I think we as staff would be very happy to work with y'all, and certainly I think target me and Sarah and Patrick as giving us ideas that you want us to explore or materials you want us to look at as maybe a starting point, to then we can focus you in the direction that makes the most sense.
Okay, cool.
So if I can push back just a little bit, probably my naivete. Guideline documents, I guess where I'm from would probably be more done by professional associations. So we'd come out with a rule, and then professional associations, whatever they are within this context, would provide guidelines, templates, and whatever you need in order to meet the rule, versus putting that on a board that may not have the capacity long-term to maintain that. Am I thinking about this different?
No,
correctly?
you're right, you're spot on. The problem is, that Dr. Merchant's pointing to is a lot of the communication and feedback that we get from our stakeholders is that they want more communication, they want more clarification. A lot of times they call the board, and staffers are who are there, not us. And they have a question about a rule, and maybe how to live out that rule or how to be in compliance with that rule. And the staff can't really answer that question. And so what Dr. Merchant's sort of trying to say is there a way for us to fill the gap? And maybe the best way is to point them towards professional organizations. I don't think that's a bad idea. You're absolutely right. And I think Dr. Merchant, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Merchant's just trying to kind of address something that we are hearing as far as feedback goes, about why they're not getting more direct answers from staff.
So I would agree with that. The question I've got is it sustainable to have the board do? That's the only real question. Certainly needs to be done.
And it may be that one of the, thinking of like a web page, what it could be is it's a resource page where the board is simply pointing folks to those materials provided by others. And saying, we're not producing them, but here are other organizations that have these materials you might want to look at.
It's more sustainable,
Probably.
This is Dr. Elder. So I absolutely agree with Mr. Hampton's point about whatever we produce would need to be evergreen so that we are not in the business of maintaining guidelines on a very regular basis. The other thing would be if we were to create a website, part of our website that just points to other places to go get resources. Are we hampered from doing that in any way because that implies endorsement? That's what I've heard in the past.
We would need to consider that, absolutely. And so I can't promise one way or the other at the moment, but I think that is the consideration, yes. And so I think what I would want to know most, I think the most helpful next step would be to hone in on the particular first bites of the apple that we're interested in clarifying, and to be able to see, is it a rule change that's needed? Because some of it may be that the rule just needs to be more clear. Or is it a practice issue that, let's figure out the specific question, and then maybe we can come back to y'all with it.
Makes sense to me. Any further discussion?
Well, to piggyback on that really quickly, you brought up a point that made me think maybe we're even the thought of guideline is irrelevant because it's already covered in the FAQs. And if they're not going to access it in an FAQ, they're not going to access it in a guideline. So if we see glaring deficits in like themes of what people need, maybe it's already there and they just don't know it. Just a thought.
Okay, any further discussion about this particular item?
Okay, I just want to add in real quick. I love that we are moving forward with the CE brokers. I'm so thankful. I know that's a ton of work to get the bids, and I'm so thankful that we're moving forward. And also for stakeholders and public who are listening, I'm super excited that if you look through the proposals, the base is free for all licensees. If you choose to upgrade to a higher package that offers more bells and whistles, you can, but the use of the CE tracking system would be free to all licensees. So just wanted to put that out there.
Well, I was gonna actually ask for some more explanation on that. And before we get there, I want to stay on the strategic plan for 1 second. Going back to the strategic plan, there was something in there about an annual registry. And how is the annual registry different from our license verification system?
So, if I'm remembering correctly, not pulling up the page, there is a provision in statute that requires psychologists for us to maintain certain licensure information for psychologists on a separate registry page
Okay.
that no one else does.
Okay, so this only applies to psychologists.
And so
Does it apply to- okay.
And so that is a long-term strategic goal to look at that basically says we have our licensees and we maintain some of their information. They're listed on other registries and these psychologists are listed in this other registry. The ultimate goal is for consumers to be able to effectively find providers when they need them.
Okay.
Is there a role for the agency to more effectively streamline this information in a more manageable location? That's a nascent idea for a long-term goal.
Okay, cool. Okay, let's now move on to the CE tracking. Okay, so y'all update us on exactly where we are with this whole CE tracking thing.
So we are working on, the council has approved the proposal from CE broker. Pardon? And we are working on entering into a contract with them.
Okay.
Because of our online systems database, separate from us, nothing to do with us, has a configuration freeze. We're not confident that we'll be able to get the system up and running until next year. And so to give everyone lots of lead time, I think the goal is to go live with CE broker September 1st of 2025.
Okay.
And for everybody listening, and we're gonna be making lots of announcements and we're gonna say this many times over the next year. But as Dr. Eller said, it is a free platform where everyone would create a profile and using their licensing information. They would then, over the course of their 2-year license term, upload documentation of all the CEs that they take. Their system will have all of our rules in place and will update as our rules change for what categories of CE are required. And so then when a licensee comes to us to renew their license, our system will simply ping CE broker and say, have they completed all the CEs required? Yes, they're good to go. And that will be all that is required. They won't have to send us any CE materials.
So it'll be almost like 100% audit. So instead of y'all doing a 5% audit, it'd be like 100% audit.
Right. There will still be audits to verify that the documentation that you're uploading is not a picture of your cat.
Okay, yeah,
But otherwise, yes.
okay.
And this is a CE repository and tracking, not a CE provider.
Correct.
Okay.
I believe through their platform, they may have relationships with providers. And so that is part of the way they earn their profit is that they are providing access for our licensees to go take CE, but it will not have any relationship to who needs to take CE. So you can still go to the providers you choose and upload whatever certificate they give you. And for our purposes, it is just a repository.
And it can be customized, like for supervisors that need 6 extra hours or 6 hours of supervision. It can be
It will know
delineated,
what those
broken
rules
down
are.
per licensee.
Yes.
Where has this been? It's gold.
It is currently being used by the medical board and the optometry board
Optometry, I think, yeah.
and one other Texas license. It's nationwide and it's being used in Texas right now.
So I know that it's,
Good.
I'm sorry.
No, please.
I know that it's free for our licensees. What is the cost for BHAC?
It's free for us as well.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Okay, so they basically make money when people upgrade.
Upgrades and the CE providers that enter in the relationship to get,
Is that the concierge service?
yes.
Or concierge, you
Yeah.
say that anyway.
And particularly, I think they market that for folks who have multiple licenses in multiple states.
Okay,
Then they can more easily translate across multiple requirements.
yes, Nicole?
Yes, so this will be, the target date you said is 2025 September 1. Across BHEC, all licenses. And
Correct.
Dumb question. You have dual license, you won't have to have separate accounts, you can have one account. or
I-
one-
I think so. One
Yeah, I believe one account per person, but
That's a good question. I think so.
yeah, I think so. That is, we're still in the contract negotiations, so.
Put that in there.
But yes, we will make sure to figure out, because, and they know that our licensees hold dual.
When I was looking through like the proposal, they had this little like, like little chart of like, this is what you get for $0, this is what you get for $39, this is what you get for $129. And that multiple license tracking, I think I saw that in there with the free one, even that you can track multiple licenses under one.
What I can't promise is, will you have to upload the same certificate twice?
Okay.
Maybe, we're not into those details. We also will still, there's obviously the starting date. There will be people who in October of 2025 are renewing and will not have had very long with the system to upload. We are aware of that. We have a whole year to figure out the rollout phasing and how people will be able to upload things. So rest assured, it's not going to be a September 2nd, you have to spend 18 hours uploading documents.
Maybe have 2 rollout dates, like a spring and a fall or something.
Yeah,
Figure it out.
we know it's an issue. We're just at the early phases of figuring out how it's gonna happen.
Well, thank you. I would like to backtrack to something. Is there any other conversation about this? Okay, I just wanted to backtrack to some of the proposed rules. I just want to say that I was happy to see 882.21, where a licensee can no longer let their license expire to avoid the complaint process. So I was really grateful to see that rule. I also am pleased with 884.10 regarding that it expands basically staff's ability to close cases. So I think that'll be good. And then I had a question about 885.1, the executive council fees. I noticed gratefully that y'all have added a temporary license fee of $103. And so I guess my question is how close are we to being able to implement that temporary license now that we've set a fee for it?
So we had to get the proposal out, and so both the proposal and the temporary license rule
Okay,
will now be proposed on the August 2nd Texas Register.
okay, fantastic.
And with the aim at adoption at the October 15th council meeting. So at this, the intention would be for y'all to approve recommending adoption of those at your September meeting, fully adopted in October.
Okay.
That's the goal.
Very cool. Okay, so for any of those listening or just board members who are new, basically this would create a temporary license that would allow somebody from out of state to be able to provide therapy to somebody who is in the state temporarily. So if they have a college student who's home for Christmas break, if they have a client who is traveling in Texas, this would provide a way for them to be able to continue providing services. So. Okay, any other questions, comments, concerns about agenda item or just further discussion about agenda item number 17?
Dr. Merchant, you can always count on me. I have a
Yay.
question.
I love it. I love it, Jody.
Okay, C 4, the monthly licensee tally and development of interactive maps reflecting licensee data. I clicked on that and it had some great, it's a beautiful map, had some great data about LPCs. I don't know if I wasn't pressing the buttons right or to get to the LMFT part, or if we're just not there for LMFT. So my question is, are we going to do this for LMFT and how will this data be used?
Y'all don't get a map. No, yeah, this was just the first map. The intention is to have maps for all the licensing strata and the boards. We're currently working, McGregor has been working hard on this map. And I believe the last time we spoke, his and I intention is to have one map where you as the user can choose which data you would like to be reflected on the map. So do you want to see the number of LMFTs compared to LMFT supervisors? Or do you want to see a comparison of LPCs and LMFTs across the state, or all the licensees, or all the supervisors, so that you can reflect that on the GIS data? And that ultimately we would have that probably on our website, so anybody can see it at any time.
This
All of
provides,
that takes a lot of work.
does this provide names or does it only provide like, there are 5 in Taylor County?
The second is just the raw numbers.
Well, thank you so much, McGregor, for your hard work. The map is beautiful. I think it's very helpful. And I can't wait to see the LMFT version.
Any other questions, comments, discussion about agenda item number 17? Okay, then we will move on to agenda item number 18, report from our board administrator.
So I shared with you in your board materials, the Department of Veterans Affairs had proposed a national, I'm gonna get the words right, proposed marriage and family therapist national standard of practice. Staff received that earlier this spring, and the VA requested a response from the board before June 25th. But of course, the board can only officially act during a legally constituted meeting like this one, and so could not provide comment before the June 25th deadline. Staff on your behalf reviewed it and sent a response, and so I just included that information for you in your materials. Also on June 6th, I attended the Texas Statewide Health Coordinating Council. I included my notes in your packet of materials just for your information. I don't believe there's any action items to take at this time. Just wanted you to be aware of that council and what it's proposing. A lot of the conversation goes really quickly as one committee makes a report and another committee makes a report. So I get as much information as I can, but I can't give you more than parrot what they said during their meeting. But if you have a question, then I can certainly investigate or see what I can find out from the sources that are there. In April, I attended the TAMFT conference to staff a table for questions and just to be a resource there for the attendees. I wanted to bring to everyone's attention on our webpage. This is the homepage at www.vhec.texas.gov. If you slide down to the quick links bar on the right-hand side to the second bullet, proposed rule changes and the rulemaking process. It's been updated to show the most recently adopted rules. So they'll be listed in one convenient place, recently adopted rules, and then on August 2nd, or if anything's proposed in the meantime, proposed rules, and click a button to fill out the form to do the public comment will be there as well. Back up to the top of the page, if you click on the masthead, State Board of Examiners of Marriage and Family Therapists, you get a slightly different set of quick links. I draw your attention to the How to User Guides quick link, which has helpful information if you have to do any kind of transaction with our database, such as renewal or ordering a duplicate license or that kind of thing. and to the frequently asked questions webpage. Lots of helpful information there. And then also the statute and rules webpage includes our consolidated rule books. These are updated every time, shortly after a rule is adopted. So they've not yet been updated for the rule that became effective on July 16th, but they are in the works. I expect next week sometime we'll have that posted. Would like to announce on July 25th will be what Daryl has called a leadership listening hour. So if you subscribe to email updates, which is the quick link here, second to the bottom, you would have gotten a notice of that event. You can log in, and the executive staff at BHEC will be listening to stakeholders' comments. And as we earlier mentioned, July 26th for this town, the MFT town hall, be listening to stakeholders and interested parties' comments on the rule review. The next board meeting is September 27th, and the next council meeting is October 15th. And that concludes my report, unless you have any questions.
Any discussion? Okay. We've already somewhat talked about agenda item number 19, discussion and possible action regarding future priorities of the board. Is there anything else you would like to add here?
Jody Racer.
Oh, Jody, yes.
Yeah, so I just wanted to let you all know that I will be attending the Association of Marital and Family Therapy Regulatory Boards meeting in Baltimore, Maryland. That's in September. That basically is all the MFT boards from across the country getting together, kind of saying, hey, what trends are you seeing? What's happening in your state? Just so we can have an ear to the ground about what trends are coming our way and how Texas could be proactive in helping to manage some of those. And then the other thing I'll be attending right after that, also in Baltimore, Maryland, is the Council on Licensure, Enforcement, and Regulation Conference, which is 3 days after that one. And it's essentially saying all regulatory boards, not just mental health boards, but all regulation and what the trends are there. So I'm happy to kind of bring back information from those. I did want to ask the board members to just send me your thoughts in general. It looks like we're shaping up to have some general sessions at the AMFTRB board meeting about AI and about coaching. So it's possible I might serve on a panel to talk about how we're handling coaching. So if there's anything in particular you want me as a Texas board member to represent on the national level, please let me know that so that I can bring your wishes forward. Thanks.
What about, we'll move on now to agenda item number 20, announcements and comments not requiring board action. Any comments from any of the board members?
Is that the TCA stuff and some of those upcoming events?
Yeah, TCA is in November. Yeah. Yes, yeah. I would like to open up the floor again for public comment. If there's any public comment from anybody present or from anybody online.
I'll make a comment.
Okay.
Tim Parker, TAMFT, ACU Online. First I want to say, I appreciate the board's willingness to explore CEs for crisis management, crisis intervention. I feel like that's an area that is not always addressed well in education settings. As somebody that worked specifically in suicide prevention for the VA for a number of years, that's an area where I felt like a lot of clinicians across the board, not just MFTs, but LPCs, social workers, psychologists, don't receive adequate training in that area. So I appreciate the board's willingness to address that through a CEU. I'm sad that there was an impasse in that at the current state. I hope that that's something that we can explore again in the future. Also, as I look through our rules for MFTs, there's no educational requirement for that. It says that there needs to be a piece for that, but there's no minimum hours stated. So that could be a drive-by of, hey, this is what you do in crisis in a class, and we can check that box. And I don't think that that's adequate, considering that a lot of times we might be frontline for somebody that's going through a mental health crisis. And I think we need to have those pieces. So I hope that that's an area we can explore more. Dr. Elder mentioned coaching. One of the things that is the case that a lot of people don't realize is that life coaching is part of the MFT rules. So there's a lot of people that try to circumvent the rules by coaching. I see a great issue in the field. This is something I've talked about with many colleagues, where we have a number of people who don't want to adhere to the rules or don't want to abide by the rules, and so are moving into coaching instead of being licensed. The other issue with that is people that are no longer allowed to practice move into coaching. And at the end of the day, the rules exist to protect not only us, but our clients as well, and the general public. And so one of the things that I don't know what the role of this board is with that, but that might be a higher level, but it's concerning to me that somebody can be told, hey, you can no longer operate in this capacity as an MFT, but now you can become a life coach and can still maybe expose the public to the same misdeeds that you were exposing them to as an LMFT. And so I don't know what this board's role is with that, but Dr. Elder, as you go to speak, with those boards, I imagine that might be part of the coaching piece that's coming up. I do know too that a lot of coaching people are moving to that because of the lack of limitation of practicing across state lines. And so I appreciate the board's willingness to look at how do we make that easier for people that are coming into Texas practice and those going from Texas to other states to practice. As somebody that's licensed in multiple states, I can tell you that I love the standards that we have here in Texas, from our CEU requirements, having them in place and clear cut what they are, to also requiring some training and follow up with regards to being a supervisor. So thank you all for that work and what you do with that. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. Ms. Mills or Mr. Crowe? Okay. Anyone who is attending by computer, if you would use the raised hand feature to let me know that you might wish to provide some public comment. Ms. Ray? Can you unmute?
Oh, there we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes, a little louder.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, I'm a MFTS and an LPCS, and I'm wondering if the new CEU platform is going to charge me because I have 2 licenses.
No, we don't know all of the details, and so it would certainly depend upon your choice of the model that they offer. But there will always be and they have committed to a free standard option. And the fact that you have multiple licenses should not change that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ray. Any other public comment? Please use the raised hand feature. I see no other raised hands. And
Raymond raised his hand.
oh, okay. Mr. Rume, you have public comment?
Yeah. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I would say the idea on recording hours and how to putting guidelines on there and putting supervisors kind of qualification and continuously education is really good idea. And because I felt that when recording hours just for although I'm just starting, but the hours we record is kind of self-reported. And although we do have our procedure to go through to monitored hours, and it actually happens through the website. We use called therapy appointment, and we have written paperwork to record our hours. But sometimes I still feel I still feel a sense that it's could be misused in a way, if that makes sense. People can make up hours kind of thing, and I don't feel like it would be that hard, and be honest. Yeah, but I think it's just a good idea to provide some guidelines for that. And also another thing I'm curious about is if you guys can talk about there are things that you guys as like board members or a board, generally speaking, cannot do. And I wonder how those things could be, like who will make the change to those things then? What is there a higher authoritative organization does that? I'm just curious.
Yes, Robert.
And generally speaking, that would be the Texas legislature. So that is, they establish the statutes by which we operate our agency.
Additional public comment?
I see no other raised hands, and I see no one logged in by phone.
Okay,
So that
Um,
concludes public comment.
fantastic. Okay, that means that we are on to adjournment. So does anybody want to make a motion?
I move that we adjourn.
Okay. All those in favor of adjourning? Okay, we are adjourned.
Whoa, that wasn't a bang.
Oh, it
And I'm
was.
trying.
There we go.
And,
And
substantial.